Good evening and thank you. I'm here to present the Distinguished Broadcaster Award to Fran Lucca. At my age, the thought of somebody going strong for 60 years in Buffalo media is nothing short of astonishing. Fran Lucca has done just that, and not only has he thrived, but so too have the many thousands of viewers and listeners who've been fortunate enough to enjoy his work on both television and radio. Fran started in 1939 as a Boy Scout columnist for the Buffalo Evening News. Today, he owns his own production company. In between, he spent 23 years at Channel 4 and WBEN Radio, 14 years at Channel 17. He was the boss of Buffalo's first UHF newscast in 1953 at Channel 59, and he's also worked for newspapers, radio stations, and wire services, not to mention his World War II service as a radio man aboard a Navy destroyer. Fran continues to this day as a triple threat. He's a fine writer, a gifted producer, and a terrific reporter. It's my sincere pleasure to present this award to a distinguished broadcaster, Fran Lucca.
Okay, this award means very much to me for the simple reason that it was given to me by my peers, and I thank you very much. I'd like to recognize my wife, Mary Jane, my daughters, Judy, Lynn, and Debbie, my sons, Brian and Jeff, Diane and Bruce couldn't be here tonight. I have Timmy in Colorado and Mike and Mark down in Florida. And I'd like to recognize them. And also Ron Arnold, who always wanted me to adopt him so he could get into my inheritance. I think you're in right now. So I'll be very brief. I also would like to recognize some of the people that helped me during my career, that inspired me and gave me such great advice. I'd be remiss if I didn't start with my dad, who was a foreign correspondent for the Buffalo Evening News, who just thrilled us with stories of interviews with Mussolini and Hitler and his henchmen. And then when he started his weekly newspaper, I helped him out with a sports column. We had some great helpers then. One was Eddie Tranter, former sports editor of the Times, who gave me this advice. Kid, he said, forget all that college talk. He said, when you write for somebody, think of this man coming home from work. He takes off his jacket. He's in his shirt sleeves. His feet are up on the coffee table. He's got a bottle of beer in his hand. You write for him. And that was good advice. Another man was Bill Martin, W.E.J. Martin, editor of the Courier, also a drama critic. And his advice was, Francis, when in doubt, leave it out. Well, then finally, which is good advice today, finally, we got to WXRA. I was supposed to be a salesperson, but I spent much of my time watching Jack McLean gather the news, his little police radio and his microphone, and I think that's where I got the idea I'd like to do this the rest of my life. Then I had to get a little writing experience, and at the United Press as a staff correspondent. Eddie Finan, the bureau chief, was quite a taskmaster. It was a baptism of fire. First day he met me, he said, Kid, he said, in this business, you either sink or swim. So I figured I'm in for it. It seems that for the first 3 weeks, he used to leave a little note on my desk. I'd open it up, and he said, in this business, you either sink or swim, and you're sinking. This went on, this went on for quite a few weeks, and I was getting a little upset, and I was ready to bail out, but Jack Horrigan, who was the assistant bureau chief, was a little more kind, and he'd leave me a little note. He said, hang in there, kid, hang in there, kid, and I really appreciated that. Finally, about the letters, the little notes stopped, and finally, about 3 months later, I felt great when the office, and there on my desk is a note. I didn't want to open it up, but I figured I'd had to, so I opened it up. He said, in this business, you either sink or swim, congratulations, you're treading water. From there we went into television, channel 59, WBES TV. It was only on the air 3 months, but we had some great people there. Roger Baker was the manager, Ellen Lewis from GR, chief announcer, Woody Magnuson from WBEN, program director. He had an 18-year-old kid come in from Lockport to be our booth announcer. Great guy, we loved him, but unfortunately he was drafted a month later, and we figured, well, he comes back as a civilian and gets back into this business, he should do pretty well. His name was Tom Jones. And then the best part of working there was watching the weather girl. Now, I know this is politically incorrect, but we used to call her the weather girl at that time. We'd stop everything just to watch her practice. She was lovely then, and she's more lovely today, and it's Doris Jones. Then it was WBNY, a great station, a great training station, and Billy Miles always told us, be aggressive without being abrasive. And finally, WBEN, radio and television. Took 6 years, we finally got there, and I think that the man that I admired most in this whole business was Mr. Alfred H. Kirkrover, the managing editor of the Buffalo Evening News, the president of WBEN, Inc. He was just noted for responsible ethical journalism. We were in the second floor of the Buffalo Evening News building doing our morning radio. He'd be right across from us, and he'd come in at 9:20 every morning with his blue pencil. He'd start marking the copy. I tried to look to see what he was writing, but as you know, if you've heard, the chair was bolted next to his desk. Now, I know there's one thing I have to mention, that the only problem I ever had there was somebody was stealing my newscasts. I'd go in there at 4:45 in the morning, make the rounds, 20 calls, police, deputies, fire, sheriff, hospitals, and I'd write the newscast for 5 o'clock. Some new kid on the block down the street tape recorded the 5 o'clock news, and at 6 o'clock I'd hear my stories coming back to me, word for word. Now, it's bad enough he stole these stories, but he had to rub it in like this. This is for you, Western New York. Remember where you heard it first. We knew who that was. Well, everything came to an end. 24 years later, the stations were sold, and we were all out of a job, and it was very devastating. You're 50 years old, you're a little portly, you're gray. Well, go to the news, go to the Courier, go to the TV radio stations. Nobody wanted you. I hope this never happens to anybody in this room. But if it ever does, I hope you have a wife like mine who stood by me and got me through the most devastating time of my life, and I thank her for that. Finally, as Irv would say, a year later, Marianne Lauricella had a column in the news, quote, "Old reporter gets second chance." Thanks to Linda Hunt, she called me. She needed an investigative reporter for the documentary unit, which I took and headed up the department for the next 14 years. I thank Linda, and I thank her boss, Mike Collins, for giving me that second chance and restored my self-confidence and my dignity, and I thank him for that. I thank all of you for this moment. It means very much to me. I would just like to be remembered as an honest reporter who did his best to give you stories that were fair, accurate, balanced, and in good taste, and who always believed that freedom of the press is not a license for irresponsibility. Thank you very much.
I wanted to show you what the distinguished broadcasters are getting. They're getting this honor from Buffalo Broadcast Pioneers, and in this hand a proclamation from Assemblyman Robin Schimminger. All for you.
Well, how nice. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Ladies and gentlemen, a legend, Mr. Irv Weinstein.
One small piece of unfinished business. A while ago, my friend Fran Lucca mentioned 40 years ago, a young newscaster on KB radio used to steal News Alive at 15 and 45. I had to do the newscast at 6:15, and I was going to be damned if I was going to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to come in and make all those phone calls in the 8 counties of western New York to find out what had been going on all night. So I would listen to Jack Ogilvy every morning on my way into work, about 5:30. And Fran had written those newscasts. And it's absolutely true. I did change some of the language, and basically it was, remember where you heard this one first. It came back to me, I didn't have many friends at WBEN radio, but it came back to me from it was an engineer. He said, Fran Lucca often describes you as that little thieving bastard at KB radio. Now, time heals everything. 40 years later, Fran and I run into each other quite frequently at the Kenmore Post Office, where we both have post office boxes, and where we go to pick up our issues of Modern Maturity and Social Security checks. And we have just the best time. Sometimes the postal guys provide coffee and donuts, as a matter of fact, and we just reminisce and talk about the good old days. The good old days when we had a lot of hair and no money. Now we've got a lot more money and no hair. Anyway, it was great to hear that story, and it's to Fran's credit that he didn't mention my name, but most of you already knew anyway. You suspected. I could tell. Ladies and gentlemen, the newest member of the Buffalo Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame, my good friend and one of Buffalo's greatest all-time broadcasters, Doris Jones.
My son said, Mom, you got to follow Irv. Wow. I promised I wouldn't cry, though. What an amazing time it is right now to be alive. Because all of the new technology is out there, and I think that Buffalo Broadcasting is just in great shape right now. And especially that includes my personal favorite of all the women who are working today, and I'm so sorry that she had to leave early, because it truly is Carol Jason. She's fabulous. I've been saying that privately for a very long time, and I was waiting for the opportunity to be able to announce it. You know, the comment that I hear most often from the young broadcasters is, you guys had more fun. The business isn't fun anymore. So I thought about that a little bit, and let's take a little bit of a walk back in time and see if we can figure that all out. First of all, television only came to Buffalo in 1948. So you figure, if we were working in the 50s and the 60s, we were just a bunch of 20-year-old kids working in a baby industry. There were no precedents set. There was not one rule that we had to live up to. So we had the tremendous luxury of being able to create art without always having to worry about the bottom line. And I have to say, before I introduce Paul, Fran Lucca, I got a story on Fran Lucca. I even ended up being a street reporter. My first day out was a dead body. And now Perky Doris, right? Jump out of the news cruiser, walk up the driveway. Fran, do you remember? Fran was there for another station, saw my face. I guess I just blanched. And he got a hold of my arm, sat me down on the front porch steps of this house, and he said, okay, it's your first one. You'll get used to it, and really got me through it. It was really, thank you, Fran, wherever you are. Anyway.